They say Phileas Fogg never stopped. Not for delay, not for doubt, not even for love. But what if, in one forgotten corner of the world, he did? Welcome to a hidden chapter in the journey of the most punctual man in literature. A story not about trains and ships, but about the time in between. The kind you don't measure with clocks. If you enjoy timeless tales, emotional storytelling, and reimagined classics, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's begin. Phileas Fogg and the Hours Between. It was precisely 8 o'clock in the morning when Mr. Phileas Fogg, having completed his toilette with customary precision, descended to the lobby of the Hong Kong hotel and presented himself at the reception desk. As ever, he moved with the mechanical certainty of a chronometer, his expression unreadable, his gait neither hurried nor sluggish, but exact, mathematically so. He was informed, with courtesy and bows, that the steamer Carnatic, by which he had intended to continue his eastward journey to Yokohama, would not be departing that day as scheduled. A delay? Fogg inquired, lifting a single brow, not in surprise, but in confirmation. He had, after all, planned for contingencies. "Yes, sir," said the clerk, a Cantonese gentleman who spoke precise English, his eyes apologetic. "The engine room requires immediate repairs. The Carnatic will remain in port for at least 24 hours, possibly more." Fogg withdrew his watch and consulted it. He compared the hour with that indicated by the lobby's wall clock, which differed from his by a mere 3 seconds. He returned the watch to his waistcoat and regarded the clerk with calm civility. "I thank you." Others might have cursed, paced, or made complaint. Mr. Fogg, however, did none of these things. Instead, he exited the hotel, walked precisely 17 paces down Queen's Road, turned, and paused at the harbor's edge. He observed the Carnatic, moored in the near distance, sailors moving briskly over her decks, and engineers swarming like ants into her underbelly. Behind him, Aouda emerged from the hotel, her silken sari catching the morning breeze, her brow lined with concern. "Is something the matter, Mr. Fogg? The Carnatic will not sail today." "Ah," she said quietly, "and what shall we do?" Fogg turned his gaze to the harbor once more. "We shall wait. Time lost is life altered," he murmured, more to the wind than to his companion. Oda looked at him, puzzled. "I thought you said time lost could always be regained." He did not answer at once. The sea, glimmering with morning light, seemed to hold his thoughts at bay. "One can regain hours," he said eventually, "but not their meaning." She said nothing further, perhaps because, for the first time, she had heard something in his voice that resembled doubt. Behind them, the city of Hong Kong stirred fully to life. Rickshaws clattered, bells rang from distant trams, and the fragrant smoke of breakfast stalls curled into the air. Fogg, for the first time in many days, had nowhere to be, and that, more than any obstacle yet faced, gave him pause. It was later that afternoon, as the sun dipped modestly toward the masts of the harbor, that Mr. Fogg was seated in the lounge of the Hong Kong hotel, reading the Overland China Mail, which he held exactly 12 inches from his face. The room bustled quietly with the clink of porcelain and the low murmur of afternoon tea conversation. Mr. Fogg sipped nothing. Presently, a man of elderly bearing approached, walking with the deliberate cadence of someone long accustomed to command, yet softened by age and reflection. His attire was of old colonial cut, slightly out of fashion but meticulously kept, and his mustache resembled the sort worn by retired generals and imperial consuls. "Mr. Phileas Fogg, if I am not mistaken," the man said with a faint bow. "I am Sir Hamilton Rowe, late of Her Majesty's service in Calcutta. May I?" "You may," Fogg replied, motioning to the empty chair beside him. Sir Hamilton sat with the ginger precision of one whose joints no longer cooperated freely, and fixed his gaze on the Englishman before him. "I've seen men chase fortune, glory, and even infamy across the world," he began. "But rarely have I observed a gentleman chasing time with quite your determination." Fogg made no reply, though he inclined his head slightly, a gesture that might have meant either acknowledgment or indifference. Sir Hamilton chuckled. "I intend no offense. It is simply that your reputation precedes you, Mr. Fogg. The clubmen in Bombay spoke of you with awe. The man who would not be bent by delay, nor tempted by comfort. They said you kept time as a banker keeps gold, inviolable." "I simply honor commitments I make," Fogg said. "Of course," Sir Hamilton nodded. "And yet I wonder, what becomes of a man when the hours betray him, when the clock refuses to be mastered? What then, Mr. Fogg?" "I adapt," came the short reply. Sir Hamilton leaned back, studying him as if examining an architectural blueprint. "You are a rare construct, sir, a monument to precision. But even monuments, I dare say, cast shadows." Fogg folded the newspaper precisely and set it down. "Do you have a purpose in speaking with me, Sir Hamilton, or merely observations?" "Both, I should think," the old man replied, producing a calling card and sliding it across the table. "I am hosting a modest dinner this evening, at my residence near the Botanical Gardens. A few civilized souls, good port, and conversation not entirely dull. I would be honored if you would join us." Fogg regarded the card as if it were a clock face whose hands pointed nowhere. "I am not in the habit of leisure," he said at last. "Then perhaps it is time to become so," Sir Hamilton said, rising. "You will find the company most unconventional. Consider it a temporary shift in itinerary." With that, he tipped his hat and departed, leaving behind only the faint scent of sandalwood and dusted leather. Aouda appeared moments later, having observed the exchange from a nearby writing desk. "An invitation?" "Yes." "And will you accept?" Fogg paused for a beat, then tucked the card into his coat pocket. "I may." For a man like Phileas Fogg, it was as good as a declaration. The evening descended upon Hong Kong with a slow, golden insistence. Gas lamps flickered to life, and the air filled with the mingled scents of lotus blossom, tobacco, and roasting chestnuts. True to his custom, Mr. Phileas Fogg dressed with immaculate precision, selecting a dark frock coat of modest cut, a silk cravat, and gloves of gray kid leather. Aouda watched him from the drawing room, her gaze steady but unreadable. "You are going, then?" she asked, her tone both casual and quietly probing. "I gave the matter due consideration," Fogg replied, adjusting the angle of his cufflinks. "It would be impolite to disregard an invitation extended with such intent." Passepartout, who had just returned from a fruitless errand concerning the Carnatic's repairs, blinked with surprise. "Monsieur is attending a social engagement? And I, who thought the sky would fall first." "The sky remains intact, Passepartout," said Fogg coolly. "You will ensure our baggage is in order. The moment the Carnatic is deemed seaworthy, we sail." Passepartout bowed theatrically. "But of course, monsieur. And may the dinner be punctual, if not palatable." Mr. Fogg departed at exactly 6:30, taking a hired rickshaw through the quieter districts toward the address Sir Hamilton had provided. The streets narrowed, and the architecture grew older, stone and teak blending in graceful neglect. At last, the rickshaw stopped before a modest colonial bungalow draped in vines, its shutters half closed against the dusk. He knocked. The door opened not to Sir Hamilton, but to a boy no older than 12. His hair was ink-black and uncombed, his eyes bright with something between reverence and anxiety. "You are Mr. Fogg?" the boy asked in accented but fluent English. I am. The boy stepped aside. Sir Hamilton is unwell, sir. He sends his apologies. He wished for me to give you this. He handed Fogg a folded letter, sealed with a dark blue crest. Fogg accepted it silently and opened it under the porch lantern. Asterisk, Mr. Fogg. If you are reading this, it means my lungs have rebelled against my hospitality. Age is not kind to men who've spent too many nights in foreign winds. Yet I hope your evening need not be wasted. Instead of dinner, I offer you a different sort of nourishment. You will find waiting nearby a gentleman named Jien. He has agreed to take you on a walk, not of streets alone, but of time itself. You are, of course, free to refuse. But should you wish to see how hours live when they are not chained to clocks, follow him. Your servant in curiosity, Sir Hamilton Rowe. Asterisk. Fogg lowered the letter. A slight movement caught his eye. A tall, spare man stepped out from the shadows beneath a banyan tree. He wore a long tunic of indigo linen, his hands clasped calmly before him. I am Jien, the man said, bowing once. Shall we? Phileas Fogg hesitated. It was not his custom to wander without purpose, nor to follow strangers without cause. Yet something in the evening air, a stillness, a possibility, held him in place. He stepped down from the porch. Lead the way. And with that, the man of schedules took his first step into an hour unplanned. They moved through narrow lanes where lanterns hung like fireflies in rows, crimson, saffron, and jade, casting long shadows upon the stone. Jien walked a few paces ahead, his stride fluid, neither hurried nor slow, as if following a rhythm heard only by him. Phileas Fogg followed, his cane tapping the ground with metronomic precision. You keep time with your steps, Jien observed, glancing back. I keep time with everything, Fogg replied without irony. Jien smiled faintly. Then tonight, perhaps, we shall walk without it. They entered a street market not listed in any guidebook, where the vendors did not shout but sang, their voices blending with the stringed instruments that played somewhere unseen. Men sat cross-legged repairing fishing nets by lamplight. Women laughed over baskets of ginger and dried plum. Children darted between stalls, their feet bare, their laughter untimed. Fogg paused near a tea vendor, who poured from a steaming kettle into delicate porcelain cups. Jien accepted one and offered another to Fogg. He declined with a curt shake of the head. Do you not drink tea? Jien asked. I do not drink in the street, nor eat, nor speak unless spoken to. Jien's tone was gentle, not mocking. I speak when necessary. And when is it necessary? Fogg did not answer. They passed a group of old men playing xiangqi beneath a banyan tree, the air filled with murmurs and the soft clack of wooden pieces. Jien stopped to watch. Fogg stood beside him, arms folded neatly behind his back. To them, Jien said, this game is not a distraction but a philosophy. Each move must serve more than the next moment. It must respect the spirit of the board. I prefer games where the rules are immutable, Fogg replied, and where victory is quantifiable. Jien tilted his head. Do you not think life itself is a game played on shifting boards? Life is not a game, Fogg said shortly. It is a series of calculations, to be solved efficiently and with minimal deviation. And yet, Jien said, here you are, deviating. For a moment, Fogg had no rejoinder. He watched a lantern sway slightly in the evening breeze. Around him, no one seemed to measure time. Passed through them, not around them. They resumed walking. Jien led him into a quiet courtyard where an elderly woman stirred a pot of congee over a coal stove. She greeted Jien warmly, her eyes crinkling. She has cooked for this neighborhood for 40 years, Jien said. Even after her husband died, she never missed a morning. She does not own a clock. She rises with the birds and sleeps with the stars. Fogg regarded her with something that might have been curiosity. And is she content? More than many with pocket watches and steamships. Fogg said nothing, but his gaze lingered longer than before. They continued through the city's forgotten arteries, past dim shrines, shuttered tea-houses, and walls covered in faded poems. And as the night deepened, so too did Fogg's silence. But this time it was not the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of observation. At last they emerged onto a hill that overlooked the harbor. Below, the Carnatic lay still, her great funnel exhaling a lazy curl of smoke. Fogg looked down at the vessel as if seeing it not as a means, but as a question. "You have shown me a city," he said quietly, "but I am no wiser for it." "Perhaps not yet," Jen replied, "but sometimes wisdom does not arrive by train." Fogg turned, meeting the man's gaze. For the first time he asked a question unprompted. "Why did Sir Hamilton send you?" Jen's smile was solemn. "Because I have known the cost of chasing time. And because I once needed someone to show me how to stop." As they descended from the hill, the moon, silver and impartial, had risen above the eaves of the tiled rooftops. The street below was quieter now. The earlier bustle softened to the hush of late commerce. Murmured haggling, the creak of carts returning home, and the slow sweep of brooms clearing the day's remnants. Jen walked a pace ahead, his hands clasped behind him in the manner of monks and philosophers. He paused now and then to nod to familiar faces, to inquire in hushed Cantonese after an elder's health or a child's studies. His manner was without urgency, as though every gesture held within it the fullness of the hour. Fogg followed, less rigid now, though his movements still bore the marks of routine. He glanced from side to side, not with wonder, but with measured curiosity. Here, amid worn shutters and whispered greetings, the world moved differently. Not slower, just deeper. Then, without warning, a blur. A boy, perhaps 15, shot past from a side alley and collided with Jen. The man stumbled backward. A cry escaped his lips, not of pain but of recognition. "My satchel!" Jen exclaimed, grasping at his side where a worn leather bag had hung moments before. The boy darted into the shadows, disappearing into a narrow passage between two shops. Fogg, without thinking, gave chase. His cane struck against the uneven stones as he ran, the tails of his coat flaring like black wings. The alley twisted and narrowed, walls pressing close, lined with shuttered windows and dangling laundry. The thief was swift, but Fogg, despite his years and stiff collar, was relentless. Each turn he anticipated, each footfall measured with uncanny efficiency. For once, the rigidity of his nature served him well. He caught the boy at the dead end of a back courtyard, a place of empty crates and broken tiles. The youth spun, brandishing a knife, but his hands trembled. His face was thin, his eyes wide not with defiance but desperation. "Give it back," Fogg said evenly. The boy held the satchel tight against his chest. I didn't mean I need. You need to return what is not yours." "I'm hungry," the boy blurted, "and my brother is sick. I don't steal because I want to." Fogg stepped closer. "And yet you did." Silence passed between them, one of iron, one of air. Then, slowly, the boy extended the bag. Fogg took it with deliberate care, and only then did he lower his cane. "Go," he said. The boy hesitated. "You won't call the constable?" "I am not here to punish, only to restore." The boy nodded, once, then vanished as quickly as he'd come. Fogg turned, and Jen stood there, breathless. He had followed quietly, though not swiftly enough. "You recovered it," Jian said softly. "I did." The man opened the satchel, confirming its contents with reverent fingers. Letters, some yellowed with time, a miniature portrait in lacquered wood, and a small pouch of herbs. "My wife's last things," Jian murmured, cradling the bag to his chest. "Had they been lost?" "They were not," Fogg said. Jian looked at him, his eyes glistening in the dim courtyard light. "You ran not as a man of calculation, but as one who understood." Fogg's mouth tightened, not in annoyance, but in something unfamiliar, perhaps restraint. "I dislike waste," he said. "And you value memory," Jian countered. "Though perhaps you've only just remembered that." Fogg did not respond, but in his posture there was something new. Not looser, not softened, but less bound. A thread unspooling just slightly. They stood there for a moment longer, amid silence and shadow. Then Jian bowed low. "Thank you." Fogg inclined his head. "Let us return." And together they stepped once more into the night, one recovering what was nearly lost, the other beginning to grasp what he had never claimed. The streets through which they returned were quieter still, wrapped in a velvet hush. Most vendors had shuttered their stalls, and the scent of jasmine and old spice hung heavy in the air. The night, it seemed, had grown introspective. Phileas Fogg walked beside Jian, not behind him. His hands, usually encased in gloves, were now bare. He had tucked them into his coat, not out of cold, but habit. Jian, the satchel slung once more across his shoulder, did not speak. He was watching Fogg with the reverence one might give a relic, at once curious and cautious. "You did not have to chase him," Jian said finally, his voice low. "You could have summoned the local authorities, had him punished, recovered the bag by force of law." "I do not believe in needless escalation," said Fogg. "But you pursued. You confronted. You risked injury." "I have risked more for less," Fogg replied. "At least this had meaning." Jian halted at a stone bridge that arched over a quiet canal. Lanterns floated upon the water. Tiny boats of oiled paper carrying prayers, names, and hopes into the night. He turned to Fogg. "Tell me, Mr. Fogg, what did you see in that boy that made you act?" Fogg looked down at the water. "Nothing, and everything. I saw a wrong, and I corrected it." Jian shook his head gently. "No, that is what you tell yourself. But that is not the whole truth." Fogg's jaw tightened. "I do not pretend to introspection. I act. And yet you lingered in the moment. You listened to the boy. You returned the satchel without asking the price of its contents. That is not the act of a man who only calculates." Fogg looked at him then, the steady, level gaze of a man who had mastered silence but not feeling. "Why do you persist in pressing meaning into simple things?" "Because you are not simple," Jian said. "You are precise, exact, but not hollow. I've guided many men through these streets. Soldiers, merchants, missionaries. They walked past poverty and poetry alike without turning their heads. You, Mr. Fogg, chased it." Fogg turned back to the water. The lanterns bobbed, their flames trembling but unextinguished. One, nearer than the rest, bore a name written in delicate ink. Jian saw his eyes settle on it. "That one," Jian said softly. "It bears the name of my wife, Mei Lian. She died 4 years ago, when the fever swept through Aberdeen. I light that lantern every month, to remind myself that time is not cruel, only brief." There was a pause, long and unbroken. "I had a brother," Fogg said at last, and his voice was different, thinner, distant, as though reaching across a chasm. "He died young. Fever, too. In India." Jian did not reply, nor did he interrupt. He let the silence hold. My father was punctual, Fogg continued, and when the doctors failed, he said, punctuality might have saved him. I believed him. And so you became punctual. I became inevitable, Fogg corrected. They stood side by side, two men shaped by the clocks they either obeyed or abandoned. The lantern with Mei Lian's name drifted away, joining the others in the quiet current. You were not chasing time tonight, Jian said. You were chasing something else, perhaps for the first time. Fogg exhaled. Not a sigh, just a release of breath long held. I prefer when things fit, he said. When variables are few. But life, Jian said, is made of variables. Fogg turned from the bridge. The conversation closed, though not dismissed. We should return. They walked back in companionable silence, their steps no longer mirrored in rhythm, but aligned in something deeper. Understanding, perhaps, or its earliest shadow. Behind them, the lanterns drifted on, patient as stars. It was nearly midnight when Phileas Fogg returned to the Hong Kong hotel. The gaslights in the lobby flickered in golden halos, and the marble floors, recently mopped, reflected his solitary figure with ghost-like clarity. The doorman, recognizing him at once, opened the inner doors without a word. Fogg made his way to the drawing room, where a single lamp burned low beside a velvet chaise. Aouda sat reading, a novel in French, its pages folded just so, though she had not turned a leaf in some time. Her eyes lifted as he entered. You were gone longer than I expected, she said gently. There were unforeseen variables, Fogg replied, removing his gloves with practiced efficiency. She smiled faintly at the phrasing. You sound disturbed, or perhaps merely contemplative. A rare condition in either case. Fogg took the armchair across from her. He did not sit stiffly, as was his custom, but leaned back with a subtle air of fatigue, or perhaps resignation. I met a man, he said after a moment. Sir Hamilton's proxy, a guide named Jian. And what did he show you? Not sights, not in the usual sense. Then what? Fogg was silent for a moment, his eyes unfixed. Lives, unmeasured by clocks. A city not arranged for the convenience of arrivals and departures. A child who steals. A man who forgives. Lanterns on a canal. Poetry, Aouda said softly. Rather than punctuality. He did not answer, though something in his expression seemed to shift, like a compass needle recalibrating after years of magnetic certainty. I saw a man nearly broken by memory, he added, and I recalled something I had forgotten, someone. Aouda closed the book on her lap, not as a gesture of finality but of attention. It's strange, is it not? How stillness can uncover more than movement. Strange, Fogg echoed, and inefficient. She laughed not mockingly. Yet you do not seem displeased. I am not accustomed to being disoriented, he admitted. And now I wonder if orientation is always preferable. Aouda rose and crossed the room. She did not touch him. She knew better than to startle a man built of angles and routines, but she sat beside his chair, close enough that her presence could be felt. Have you never paused, even once, to consider why you pursue this journey? I made a wager, but why accept it? Fogg looked at her, truly looked, his eyes a pale storm, restrained but not still. I believed myself invulnerable, he said, and I desired to prove it. And now? He hesitated, then said almost unwillingly, now I am no longer sure that is desirable. She placed a hand lightly on the arm of the chair, not on him but near enough to signal trust. There is time yet, she said. Fogg stood. His movements were no less precise, but less mechanical, like a watch that had been wound not tighter but truer. "I must rest," he said. She nodded. "Of course." At the door he paused. "Thank you, Miss Uda, for waiting. I knew you would return," she said, "but I did not know who would return with you." He gave the faintest bow and disappeared into the corridor, his footsteps softer than before. In the drawing room, Aouda remained seated, her book untouched. For though the hour was late, she sensed that something had just begun. The next morning dawned pale and overcast, as if the city itself hesitated to wake fully. The steamers in the harbor exhaled sluggish clouds into the gray sky, and the narrow lanes below the hotel stirred with slow, deliberate life. Phileas Fogg rose as punctually as ever, at precisely 6:30, though he lingered longer than usual at the window of his suite. His gaze was not fixed upon the horizon, nor the sea beyond, but upon the thin trail of smoke rising from a rooftop chimney, a sight he might have previously deemed irrelevant. As he was adjusting his cravat before the mirror, a soft knock came at the door. Passepartout entered, his hair slightly tousled from a morning's errand. He carried a small envelope on a silver tray. "This was delivered for Monsieur," he said with a slight bow. "No name on the return, but the seal is the same as last night's card." Fogg took the envelope, examining the crest. A stylized compass rose in navy blue wax. "You may go," he said. Passepartout, ever curious, obeyed only halfway before departing. Fogg broke the seal and unfolded the letter, the paper thick and creamy, the handwriting fluid and precise. Mr. Fogg, I regret that our meeting could not be completed in the traditional sense. This body of mine, once so willing to defy time, now protests even the softest of obligations. Yet I hope you do not consider last night's journey a failure. In truth, I suspect it succeeded more deeply than a dinner ever could. You strike me as a man who keeps the world at bay with rules, and who has mistaken discipline for identity. I say this not with criticism, but recognition. I too once circled the globe not for a wager but for duty, and when I returned, I discovered that the only thing I had lost in the process was the very self I had carried with me. Time is a paradox, Mr. Fogg. It can be a prison or a path, a weapon or a mirror, but it is never truly ours to command. 1 hour in stillness can return 100 to the soul. I hope this city gives you not what you planned, but what you need. Yours in quiet revolution, Sir Hamilton Roe *. Fogg read the letter twice. He did not frown, nor nod, nor exhale with dramatic weight. But when he folded the paper, it was not with the customary precision he applied to documents and contracts. He folded it once, deliberately, gently, and slid it into the inside pocket of his waistcoat. For a long moment he stood in the center of the room, unmoving, not like a statue but like a man considering movement as a choice rather than a necessity. The clock on the mantel chimed 7. He did not reach for his pocket watch to confirm it. Instead, he walked to the desk, drew out a blank card, and wrote a note. The message was short. He summoned a bellhop and instructed him to deliver it to a small tea-house near Queen's Road. Jeanne would know it. As the door closed behind the messenger, Fogg returned to the window. His reflection in the glass was the same, immaculately dressed, perfectly postured. Yet behind the eyes, something had changed. Not unraveled, not reformed, but reopened. It was just past 8 o'clock when Phileas Fogg, alone and unhurried, made his way through the cobbled paths of the botanical gardens that rested high above the noise of the city. The morning air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and magnolia. The clouds, dispersed by the sea breeze, now let through shafts of gold that dappled the foliage in long, reaching patterns. He walked without a fixed course, an anomaly in itself. No appointment drove his step. No whistle or bell awaited him. For perhaps the first time in years, Mr. Fogg moved simply because the earth beneath him permitted it. He stopped at a marble bench beneath a banyan tree whose roots reached down like thick drapery. Across from him, the harbor unfolded. A living map of sails, steamers, and shifting tides. Somewhere out there lay the Carnatic, repaired, recoaled, and soon to resume its course. Fogg withdrew his watch not to check the hour, but to observe it. The face was spotless, the hands aligned, the tick steady. Yet it no longer brought the comfort it once had. It was an instrument of precision, yes, but not of truth. He closed it and returned it to his waistcoat. What if, he thought, I have mastered time but failed to measure myself? The question did not arise with drama or dread, but with quiet certainty, like a gentle knock on an oft-ignored door. He thought of the boy in the alley, how his hands had trembled, how his eyes had pleaded not for mercy but for meaning. He thought of Jien, whose every movement had been soft, and therefore powerful. He thought of Sir Hamilton's letter, folded now near his heart. Fogg leaned forward, his gloved hands clasped between his knees. I have mistaken constancy for purpose, he murmured aloud, and silence for strength. The words surprised him, not for their content, but because he had spoken them to no one, or rather to the only audience that mattered in that moment, himself. Behind him, a gardener passed, bowing briefly. Fogg returned the gesture, not out of habit, but out of acknowledgement. He stood slowly and walked toward a koi pond that shimmered under the morning sun. A child crouched beside it, tossing crumbs to the fish, who broke the surface in flashes of orange and white. Fogg paused, watching the child's delight. The way time melted around such simple joy. To live within time, he thought, rather than ahead of it. What an unfamiliar, peculiar freedom. For years, he had lived as though being unshaken by the world was a virtue. But perhaps virtue was not in resisting change, but in remaining present while it unfolded. He looked to the east, where the city stirred into full motion. The call of traders, the clang of trams, the flutter of laundry from the windows of 1,000 waking homes. And for the first time since beginning his journey, Phileas Fogg felt something inside him shift. Not an abandonment of who he was, but a gentle loosening of its strictest bindings. I am not a machine, he said again, more firmly. I am a man who must choose what to carry to the end. And in that moment he chose. He turned from the pond and made his way back through the garden paths, not faster but fuller. The sun was climbing steadily above the rooftops when Phileas Fogg returned to the Hong Kong hotel. He found Passepartout waiting anxiously in the vestibule, his hair windblown, his shirt collar crooked from haste. At the sight of his master, the valet sprang to his feet with the relief of a soldier spotting the regimental flag. "Monsieur," Passepartout exclaimed, "you are back. I had begun to fear the worst. A kidnapping, a duel, a spiritual retreat. I am neither missing nor converted," said Fogg, his tone dry but not unkind. "Has the Carnatic been cleared to sail?" Passepartout nodded vigorously. "Yes, monsieur. She is to depart this afternoon, at 4 o'clock precisely. The repairs are complete, and I have secured our passage. Your cabin remains untouched, as if your very presence lingers in the linens." "Excellent," Fogg replied. "Have the luggage delivered by 2. We shall not be late." Passepartout hesitated, then blurted, "Monsieur, may I ask, where have you been?" Fogg looked at him for a moment. There was no reprimand in his gaze, only thoughtfulness. "Walking," he said, "and listening." Passepartout blinked. "To whom?" "To the city," Fogg said simply. and perhaps to myself. The valet, whose understanding of philosophy extended as far as street theater and back-alley cafes, scratched his head. "Is monsieur quite well?" "I believe I may be better than usual," Fogg said. "Come, let us find Miss Aouda and take breakfast." Passepartout stared as though the sky had cracked open. "Monsieur wishes to linger?" "For the hour. No longer." The Frenchman gave a low whistle. "If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I would say someone else was wearing your coat, monsieur." Fogg allowed himself the faintest smile, a motion so subtle it might have gone unnoticed, save by those who had long studied still water. In the breakfast room, Aouda was seated by the window, reading a cablegram that had just arrived. She looked up as the two men entered. "I see you've returned him intact," she said to Passepartout with a playful glance. "Oh, mademoiselle, he returned himself, and changed, I do believe." Fogg took the seat beside her. "The Carnatic sails at 4. She nodded. "Then we have a few hours." "Exactly 2, he said, pouring tea with a steadiness that now felt less mechanical, more deliberate. They sat in comfortable silence as morning light filtered through the blinds. The clatter of teacups, the murmur of foreign voices, the scent of toast and tamarind jam, all swirled gently around them. At length, Aouda set down her cup and said, "May I ask what you found, in the hours between yesterday and today?" Fogg looked at her, and in his eyes there was no calculation, only clarity. "Space," he said, "between seconds, between certainties. I had not noticed it before." "And what will you do with that space?" she asked. He considered for a moment, then replied, "I shall carry it with me, quietly." Passepartout, who had just returned with a plate of eggs, declared, "As long as monsieur does not carry it onto the ship as excess baggage, I see no cause for alarm." They laughed. Not loudly, not wildly, but with warmth that had, until recently, no place in Mr. Fogg's regimented hours. Outside, the city pulsed with life. But inside, in the shaded calm of a breakfast room overlooking the harbor, time moved differently. It did not rush. It did not demand. Simply was. By 3:30, Phileas Fogg stood once more upon the quay, observing the Carnatic as steam hissed from her great funnel and passengers ascended the gangway in orderly procession. The harbor bustled with the usual mixture of noise and purpose, but Mr. Fogg seemed untouched by its urgency. His posture, always upright, now carried a curious lightness, as if a burden had been lifted, not from his shoulders, but from some inner mechanism long held taut. Passepartout busied himself with the luggage, checking each item against an invisible ledger in his mind. 2 trunks, 1 carpet bag, and a satchel containing Miss Aouda's shawls, all accounted for, monsieur. "Very good," Fogg replied, his gaze still fixed upon the vessel. Miss Aouda joined them, the hem of her ivory dress brushing softly against the wooden planks. She wore a wide-brimmed hat, but the expression beneath it was clear, calm, yet questioning. "The ship awaits," she said. "And so we return to motion," Fogg replied. They ascended the gangway together, and as they reached the deck, the ship's bell rang once. A deep, resonant toll that echoed across the bay. "Right on schedule," Passepartout noted with satisfaction. Yet Fogg did not respond immediately. He had turned, looking back at the city, a rarity, for he was not a man who often looked behind him. Aouda stepped closer. "What do you see?" Fogg considered the question. Below, the streets of Hong Kong wound their way through memory and mist. Somewhere within them, Jian would be pouring tea or speaking softly to a stranger. A lantern might still float on the canal, bearing a name the world had nearly forgotten. "I see a place where something was paused," Fogg said at last. so that something else might begin. The ship's engines groaned, then hummed to life. The harbor water churned as the Carnatic pulled gently from the pier, its prow cutting a graceful path into the open sea. As the shoreline receded, Passepartout approached. "Monsieur, may I confess something?" Fogg inclined his head. "I feared we would lose time in Hong Kong. But now, I wonder if perhaps we gained it." Fogg regarded his valet thoughtfully. "There are many kinds of time, Passepartout. Only some are kept by clocks." The Frenchman grinned. "Then let us hope we've kept the right kind." They stood together at the rail as the island shrank into the haze. Wind tugged at their coats, gulls circled high above, and the sea stretched out before them, vast, unknowable, unbroken. Fogg reached into his waistcoat, withdrew his watch, and opened it. He studied the hands, still precise, still faithful, and then, without announcement, adjusted it 3 minutes behind. Passepartout blinked. "Monsieur." Fogg closed the watch with a soft click. "Time enough," he said. Uda smiled. "Then we are not late?" "No," Fogg replied. "Only different." And with that, the Carnatic sailed onward, bearing not just passengers, but the quiet, immeasurable weight of transformation. The Carnatic had slipped fully into the South China Sea, her course steady toward Yokohama. The sky was the color of cool porcelain, streaked with fine clouds like brushstrokes from a careful hand. Phileas Fogg stood on the deck beside Miss Uda, his hands resting lightly upon the rail. Not gripping, not calculating, simply resting. The air was temperate, the horizon wide. For once, it was not the next station that filled his mind, but the motion of the ship itself, and the space that lay quietly between one moment and the next. Passepartout approached from behind, holding a folded newspaper and a grin that could only belong to a man delighted by routine. "Monsieur, shall I read you the shipping column? Or perhaps the betting odds in London?" "Neither," said Fogg gently. "Not today." Passepartout blinked, then slowly smiled. "Very good, monsieur. Very good indeed." He tucked the paper under his arm and wandered off, whistling a tune that was, for once, in no particular tempo. Ayuda turned slightly, her voice calm and curious. "May I ask one final question?" "You may," said Fogg. "Was the delay in Hong Kong an inconvenience?" Fogg considered. "It was not convenient," he admitted. "But it was necessary." "Necessary for what?" "For me to arrive." She tilted her head. "But you were already there, were you not?" He met her gaze. "Not fully." A silence followed, an agreeable one, where no answer was owed and no further question pressed. Fogg withdrew his watch once more, polished it gently with his handkerchief, and opened the lid. The mechanism ticked with its usual authority, but he no longer regarded it as sovereign. 3 minutes behind the hour, it remained, and he let it. He closed the watch, placed it back in his pocket, and said, "There are journeys within the journey, Miss Uda. Ones not recorded on timetables or wagered upon in gentlemen's clubs." She nodded. "And have you completed that journey?" "No," he said, "but I've begun it." She smiled. "That, I think, is the greater triumph." The Carnatic pressed forward, carving a path through the indifferent sea. But for the first time in many days, Phileas Fogg did not watch the water for signs of land, nor the sun for signs of delay. He watched only the present, and found it, for once, enough. Behind him, the ship's chronometer struck the hour. Phileas Fogg did not turn. And so, the man who raced the world discovered something far more elusive, the value of a single quiet hour. Thank you for listening to Phileas Fogg and the Hours Between. If this story moved you, taught you, or simply gave you a pause to breathe, please leave a like, subscribe for more narrated stories, and share your favorite moment in the comments. Until next time, may your journey be steady and your pauses meaningful.